One picture is worth 1,000 words, and it is oftentimes pictures that capture us and hold our attention. I've used many of the old Bethel pictures up here because every time I do, they kind of make something of the words come alive. You can visualize them many times. Pictures tend to hold you and catch you. I know we're one of the few congregations that still uses these old style of bulletins. If you've been to many other churches, you know they have their programs that just print out the black and white. They're kind of a non-informative much of anything. And you know, but I really like our pictures. They catch many times the picture is based on the gospel for the day. Dan and I have talked about it many times, and many of them are very meaningful, and I take a number of them home, and I take one of those little magnets and I put it up on my refrigerator, and it reminds me of that word. And they might be there for years, you know, on those refrigerators or hanging on the wall, looking at those pictures. Pictures, they say, are worth 1,000 words. You see them throughout in different offices. Maybe you subscribe the Our Iowa magazine. But here, like example, just the picture catches you right at the front door when you look at this. Now we have sunflower, and the sunflowers are now coming out and blossoming across the state at this time of the year. And then here's what I also subscribe to our Wisconsin. I lived in Wisconsin for a number of years, and this switches seasons on us. But this is what is ahead of us coming down the road, but you don't have to worry about that. That's a long time down the road. But the picture grabs the person immediately, or it doesn't. There are some pictures you look at them and they just don't connect to you, and you kind of just go on. Well, today, I just point you to the front of this bulletin. Come to me, all you that are weary. And here it shows a person, a nurse or a hospital worker of some kind, who's standing in a hallway. Who knows? They could have come out of a room where a very sick patient was. They could have come out of a room where someone has just died. They could have come out of a room where someone had just got into kind of a conflict with them and was yelling at them. You know, that happens too. But whatever, the person is kind of stopping, looking down, rubbing their forehead, just wondering. We can conjecture. We don't know. Maybe they have a headache coming on. We just don't know. But the picture does catch to us or communicate to us that something is going on that brings weariness or heaviness to the mind of this individual. And we can identify with that. There are many things that bring weariness and heaviness into the hearts and minds of people. It can be disappointment, depression, heartache, hopelessness, fear, uncertainty. And what often happens in many times is it's a combination of those things that kind of lead a person to being kind of overwhelmed with it all. You know, they say when one thing goes wrong, probably two or three others are ready to happen. You know, a car may break down, and then the furnace goes, and then there's a medical issue, and they're all happening in a short period of time. And the culmination of those things just kind of wear us down, depress us, or discourage us. And everyone seems to have these problems. Now, some people talk about them. Some people are honest about heartaches or struggles. Other people, you never hear a word. But that doesn't mean that things aren't going on in their life, that they don't feel like this. You've maybe seen recently, I know in my area, they've started some new programs to work with law enforcement officers. They have about 10 times the stress of a normal person in their day-to-day life. And the kind of people that are in that profession, a lot of them just don't talk. But what the result is long-term physical and mental problems that occur to them because of that. And a very high rate of suicide for many of them also. So they're burdened, troubled, but it's kind of hidden. And the hope is to get some of this out to help. I mentioned a number of times my father-in-law was in a nursing home about 4.5 years before he died. And my mother-in-law would go and see him most days. Some days the weather was bad, but most days she would go and she spent time with him at the nursing home. And one day, maybe 3-4 years into this, she said to my wife when she was just talking to her, she got home that day, and she just pulled into the garage. And she just, the car was sitting there in the garage, and she turned it off, and she just broke down and she just cried. And just probably cried for 10 minutes, just cried and cried and cried. It was like the cumulative effect of the years were just kind of catching up with her and wearing her down. And she felt really a sense, I think, of discouragement at that point. But Jesus says to us that he can help us with the burdens that we bear. Jesus says to us that he can help us with the heartaches that we struggle with in life. And sometimes there can be a lot. We can go years and we might get by pretty good, but we've all lived long enough to know they come and go, and they can be heavy and hard at times. I would now like to just have you focus on exactly the words that Jesus said. And would you say them with me? Say them with me. They're at the end of the text, 28 to 30. Jesus said, so please say them with me as we read them. Come to me, all of you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. So where do we go when the burden is heavy? Where do we go when we feel we can't talk to anybody, or we just choose not to talk to anybody? Where do we go when we don't know where to go? Come to Jesus. Come to Jesus and give it to the Lord. And in giving it to Jesus, it doesn't take it away. Sometimes we pray and we ask, Lord, this person is very ill. Would you bring healing to them? And they get better, but they aren't, quote, totally healed, and they deal with a chronic problem long term. And we wonder, well, was our prayer answered? Or was it half answered? Because a person is better, but they're not healed. Maybe the real question is not the degree of healing, but the fact that God was involved. That God was involved with you in prayer, that God was involved in bringing whatever healing, to whatever degree it was, to the person that you had asked healing for. And that going forward, God is involved. Our rest and our comfort comes not from the fact that everything's going to work out in the way that we present it to God, that we would like it to, but that God will be involved in our pain, in our illness, in our loss, in our discouragement, and in our, at times, overwhelming frustration that we might experience with one or many issues. Rest. Contentment. Jesus says, find your rest and your contentment in me. Because we are who we are and we are sinners, we often think, well, maybe if we go out to dinner, that'll help. Or maybe if I talk to my friend from college, she's always kind of up and positive, she'll encourage me. And we come up with a wide variety of earthly solutions that we seek out help to deal with our heartaches and our problems and our frustrations. And they help sometimes for a while. But then often the struggle comes back. The loneliness, the discouragement, the depression, the sorrow, the loss. Take it to Jesus. You know what really helped me in this text was when he talks about the yoke. Now, I've never taken head oxen under my care. And I've seen all those pictures, and you've seen them too, of a yoke with two oxen often pulling, plow or whatever that they were, or if they were pulling a cart and so forth. But as I was studying on this, it talked about oxen and how that yoke shared the load. But this is one thing that I had never heard this before. Maybe you did. Many of you are from agricultural backgrounds. That farmers many times would pair an older, mature oxen with a younger one, because the older one kind of knew how to walk, and if the ground would, and the younger one was just learning. And having that steadiness alongside the younger oxen was just enough to help it along and to kind of learn its way. Now, we did the same thing today in our schools. They have student teachers, and then even when a young teacher starts out, they'll pair them with an experienced teacher for maybe to just kind of check in on how things are going and how you would handle this situation that arises and so forth. So you can kind of gradually get into it and learn from the experienced individual. Well, when I thought of that yoke, and what really helped me is that Jesus, if I'm yoked with Jesus, he's walking along with me. And he knows the way and has strong and steady steps when I'm kind of stumbling or fumbling. I'm going to be okay. Now notice, I'm not necessarily going to get better. All my problems aren't going to be solved. I'm going to have ups and downs. But I'm always going to have someone by my side that I'm yoked to, that will safely get me down the road. And that's Jesus. As simple as that. That you and I, when we're yoked to Jesus, find a presence and a rest and a comfort that we don't find often any place else in the world or even from other people. And that Jesus is steady and strong and consistent as he comes and walks with us day in and day out. down the road of life, yoked to Jesus. And when you're alongside someone now I don't know how long the oxen would actually, when they were actually doing their work out in the field. But when you're with another person that long, gradually more and more of that person's way of doing things kind of rubs off on you. You see how they do it, and you start to say, now that's the way I'm going to do it. And if Jesus not only guides us, but rubs off on us, what a wonderful God to be yoked to. But notice, it's still a rough road we walk. Those oxen often have long days, and there are parts that they might be engaging as they walk down pathways that are angled or rocky or carry possibility of danger to them. They have to deal with it. We walk down many walkways of life that carry all kinds of possibility of danger and frustration, illness and death, separation and suffering. But yoked to Jesus, we're never alone. That is just, it was to me, I pray to you, is comforting news, strengthening news, encouraging news. As I go down the road of life, and know that I am yoked to Jesus, I pray you do, and also draw that strength. Would you do with me as I end the sermon here again? Go back to the same verses. We're going to say it one more time. Come to me, all of you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Amen. Let us